known as the Road Warrior, Brian Road Warrior Mitchell, wearing blue trousers and grey shirts.
It's not Tony Lopez who's the big name. He's the big name for me because he's the only guy to ever beat me. He's the only guy I ever fought 4 times. And obviously he's the only guy who passed away in the ring.
Ready to rumble, you know. Now, people would expect that from me when I stand there like, let's get ready to rumble, but I don't do that.
Yeah, you must be honest with yourself. You know, I was only 30, but I had a long career. I had 49 pro fights, 14 world title fights, 9 South African pro fights. At 30 years old, yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the most wonderful, exciting bout right here on Biggie on Sport. On my right hand side, wearing blue shirts, white trousers, Sipho, ring announcer, Mashego! And taking Sipho on this afternoon, the legend himself, the man who has traveled all the journey, known as the Road Warrior, Brian Road Warrior Mitchell, wearing blue trousers and grey shirts.
Is that my opponent today?
Yes.
I got you. I got you.
At least eventually I've got an easy opponent.
Easy.
Well, we're looking forward to an exciting interaction. As you heard from my introduction, that I have 2 great boxers, if not boxing official, as well as one of the legend within the sport of boxing. We know that boxing is a hand-to-hand combat where people take war on each other. It has been dubbed as one of the dangerous sport, and also but exciting one. For some reasons, at some point, we felt that maybe boxing is taking a nose dive, but it is making its comeback. Boxing is on the resurgence because of the likes of the legends of Brian Mitchell, the legend, and the likes of Sipho Mashego. And we're going to be hearing more about their different careers within the boxing space, the role they have played. This show is meant for younger people who may not be familiar with the likes of Brian Mitchell as well as Sipho Mashego, because these are some of sports personalities who never got the opportunity many a time in your big screens to showcase the work they do behind the scenes. Without any waste of time, Sipho, welcome to Biggie on Sport.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kope. Chris, thank you, Biggie on Sport. To all the listeners that are watching this edition, thank you very much, and thank you for being here.
I've gone through your resume, if I may put it that way. My apologies. And it's quite colorful, especially you've got good traits as a public speaker. You have actually compared so many events as a program director. But before we come to your career as a ring announcer, in fact, let's allow Brian as well to come in and also greet the viewers. Brian, the Road Warrior Mitchell, thank you so much. And I'm shaking one of the golden hands. And I guess today I'm not going to wash my hand for the next coming 5 days.
Thanks, Biggie. I'm just going to complain. Why have you taken so long to invite me to your show?
Brian, you're a busy man. You are a busy man. You are a busy man.
Thank you.
You are involved in so many things, Brian. And once again, we appreciate the opportunity of making time to come with us.
Sipho is a great ring announcer. And you're doing a great job with your show, Biggie on Sport. Well done.
Thank you. Brian, before I go back to Sipho, please tell the viewers, especially young people, who is Brian Mitchell?
Brian Mitchell is a 14-time undefeated WBA and IBF world champion. I've received the ring belt. I've got the WBC belt. I was honored with the WBC belt at the convention in December. And I'm the only South African boxer in the International Boxing Hall of Fame and the World Boxing Hall of Fame. So I think I've done okay boxing. So that's who Brian Mitchell is.
That's Brian Mitchell, yeah. During your tenure, if not your era, you were in the same level as the likes of Simon Skosana, may his soul rest in peace. Jacob Killer Morake as well, may his soul rest in peace. We'll come to that later. Walk us through that.
Great fighter. Simon Skosana and I fought In 1986, at Sun City, I beat Alfreda Lane in September the 27th at Sun City, won the world title. Simon Skosana, 2 months later, I think he fought at either the Wembley or the Rand Stadium. 2 months later, could have been a world champion if his cutmen did a better job. Unfortunately, they couldn't stop the bleeding, and he was looking good against Bernard. What was his name? Penango, I think, the world champion.
Yeah.
And anyway, good fighter, good friend of mine as well, Skosana. And Jacob Baraki, unfortunately, we fought 4 times, big part of my career, big friend of mine as well. Jacob Baraki was a man from Soweto. We fought in Kwatema in your town.
Yeah, in my time, I remember.
I lost him in my only fight that I ever lost in 1982 in Kwatema. Baraki was very good. He was the Transvaal champion at the time. It wasn't Gauteng, it was Transvaal. And he beat me. I thought I'd won the fight, but I mean, he was good. He got the decision. And then I won the South African title, and then I beat Baraki 3 times after that. Unfortunately, he passed away in the last fight we fought at Sun City. But Baraki, I have to say, big compliments and kudos to him, because he's in my whole career of 49 professional fights, it's not Tony Lopez who's the big name. He's the big name for me, because he's the only guy to ever beat me. He's the only guy I ever fought 4 times. And obviously he's the only guy who passed away in the ring. So he was a good friend of mine. We were sparring partners. And the night that I won the world title after Baraki had passed a year earlier, I dedicated the world title to him as well.
I remember.
Because he would have done the same for me. And his mom was great, you know. His mom suggested at the time, she doesn't think I should come to the funeral in the middle of Soweto, but her son would have wanted me to be a world champion. And I felt the same the other way around.
Wow.
So I became friends of the Baraki family for many years. His mom passed away just last year. And yeah, that's a sad part of our career. So, you know, we've got sad moments in our career too. And obviously the rest was great, you know, winning 14 world titles outside the country and representing South Africa and coming back here. You know, I thought of emigrating like a lot of people do. I've had children that were born in America, because I lived in America for a while because of apartheid and sanctions, because I couldn't fight here.
You couldn't fight here
so
because of that, I remember.
I based myself in San Diego, America. But I've always come back here. I love this country. I love the people, and I love South Africa. And that's why I'm here having this interview.
Yeah. We want to turn attention now to Sipho. I want us, in fact, to focus on your fight with Tony Lopez. I know that you guys, you fought each other twice. But I guess this, it must be the highlights of your fight. But we'll tap onto that after Sipho. Sipho, ring announcer. I'm told that before you became a ring announcer, you were a participant in another sport.
Yes.
Yeah. Tell us more.
Absolutely. Yeah. When I grew up, you know, coming from obviously the townships, you know, I got involved in a sport, tennis. I was a tennis player.
Okay.
Yeah, we, you know, got involved in a lot of tournaments. You know, we as growing up, but at that time we were not able to compete in international, you know, tennis events because of apartheid at that time. But then, you know, then I got an opportunity to go and study in the USA.
Okay.
I was in Houston, Texas. I went to Texas Southern University, and I was on the tennis team. You know, I was playing for the tennis team for my university. Yes, in the US. You know, and then I graduated in 1990, came back to South Africa. So tennis fundamentally, you know, started me as a sporting person. Until then, I started to get involved in boxing.
What drew you into boxing?
When I was in the States, you know, I got an opportunity to meet with the late great Muhammad Ali.
Wow.
Yeah, not meeting him per se, but he was there advertising his perfume at one of his events. It was in a shopping mall.
Okay.
And I got there. I actually have a picture where I got a picture of that, because that time we didn't have the technology, the phones to take pictures with.
Exactly.
You know, as we do now.
Exactly.
Yeah, and you know, and at one point at my university entrance, this big man came walking down, and I looked at him and I said, "Who is this man?" But it was George Foreman. You know, he lived in Houston, and Brian might know that as well. Lived in Houston, and he was walking down, and I said, "But you know, this is this is one of the best boxers that I know. You know, I didn't know them per se, but it was George Foreman.
Wow.
And I was, you know, at one other instance, I was in a KFC there. There was a KFC, and in walks Evander Holyfield.
Wow.
You know, so that in a context said to me, look, there's something about the sport. You know, I need to get involved in the sport. Yeah. So when I got back, I had that interest. But growing up as well, as young kids in townships, I mean, we knew about Muhammad Ali. We had those Muhammad Ali, Dingande, you know, Dingande, Rose Tobela, you know, may his soul rest in peace. Peter Matebula, may his soul rest in peace. Brian Michel, you know, he's sitting here with us. It's quite an honor that he's sharing this Biggie on sport with us.
Yeah, the space together here.
Yes. Yeah. But that also, you know, drove me to get involved in the sport of boxing, you know, and I thought when I come back, I said, no, look, I need to start doing something in the sport of boxing. But then, you know, there were MC events that I started getting involved in, and I think one of the foremost and epic events that I was involved in was Miss Kaiser Chiefs, you know, at the Carlton Center, then the Carlton Center in Johannesburg. You know, they invited me there, and then I competed there, you know, and I started saying, no, maybe I can do this, you know, continue with this as a ring announcer, getting into boxing. Then I started getting into boxing in 1996, you know, starting with the development tournaments, you know, they've probably done thousands of those, you know, and this is where I am right now. Okay.
I want us, as we move on, in fact, to educate youngsters out there on how to become a ring announcer. What does it take? We'll pay attention now to Brian, but when we come back, think about how you're going to walk us through the journey of starting off as a ring announcer. What does it take? Because I guess anyone sitting at home could be under the impression that becoming a ring announcer, you need to be a boxer. And you, as an expert, you're going to actually put us into the light as to...
Thank you.
You fight with Tony Lopez. You fought Tony Lopez twice. Away, and then you won again, second time, away, beating him up. And I guess that was when you started throwing in the towel and say, that's it, I'm hanging my gloves up now, I'm no longer boxing. Tell us, walk us through that journey. Sure. Somebody who was in there, because it's almost 30 years, if not 31 years since you left, since
34 years ago.
34 years, 34 years ago, exactly. And you still look as fit like a needle, and you do other things, which we're going to hear more about that behind the scenes in as far as boxing is concerned as a promoter. But just educate a young man who was in there at that time about Tony Lopez.
Thanks, Biggie. Yeah, well, it was great times. You know, Tony Lopez and myself were rated the two best junior lightweights on the planet. Azuma Nelson was around, but he was fighting featherweight. He later came into the junior lights. But at the time, it was myself and Tony Lopez were the two best. And I'd had 12 defenses of my WBA title. I'd won the title and defended it 11 times. So I had 12 WBA title fights, which I'd won. And then they said to me, I must come, would I like to fight Tony Lopez in a unification? And I said, great, but it's going to be my last world title fight ever. And I went to Sacramento for my 13th world title fight. The media didn't expect me to win. The South African media and the international media said Mitchell's like reached his peak. It's not good enough to beat the great Tony Lopez.
Wow.
And I went there and I got a draw, and getting a draw in Sacramento is like getting a win. So at least the whole of South Africa got to see the fight. You know, those years that there was Dakotas and you could see the fight. And everybody saw that I was robbed. And then I decided, well, that's it. I've had 13 world title fights. What more do I need to do? And they offered me a big payday. And 6 months later, and I said, Nelson Mandela just come out of prison, and the world was opening to South Africa, which was great for me because I was never allowed to fight here. And I said to my promoter, Rodney Berman, well, let's do a fight in South Africa. You know, let's do it in front of Nelson Mandela, and let's do it in front of South Africans. And I said, no, you've got to go to America, because he's from Sacramento, and there's big television money in America. The only way we can get big money is you've got to go back to Sacramento. So I didn't want to go back to Sacramento, but I put my life on the lines one more time. 6 months later, I went to Sacramento, and I just put everything on, and I beat him in Sacramento. This time I got the decision. And that was my last world title fight ever. I did have 2 comeback fights 2 years later at Sun City, but those aren't important to me. beating Tony Lopez was just the highlight of my career.
It was the highlight of your career.
For sure.
Wonderful. Brian, what are the challenges facing boxers back then, including today? What are the challenges there? Because many boxers, we know that they depend entirely if they secure a fight. And if there isn't any fight for them, in fact, to participate in, obviously, their livelihood actually will come to a halt, if not will face challenges.
Yeah, it's very tough, Biggie, because at the end of the day, you need to have a job and be a professional boxer, because you can't just rely on professional boxing. Because your first year as a professional boxer, you might get 2 fights, you might get 3 fights. In today's time, you might earn 20 grand, 30 grand. I mean, you can't live on that for a year. But then you need to find sponsors. And sponsors only really want to come on board when they know you've won a couple of fights. So it's like putting the horse before the cart.
The cart, yeah.
So you actually, it's tough for youngsters today. You've got to first get educated. So very important that youngsters know, do your education. You want to be a pro boxer, you want to be a pro rugby player, pro tennis player, whatever, first do your education. Because you might not make it in sport. If you make it in sport, great. You know, but get your matric, you know, get to university if you need to.
Yeah.
And then worry about professional boxing. But it's tough for youngsters because you first have to prove yourself and be good before the sponsors look at you. So you need to win 5 fights, 10 fights, and then the money starts coming. Then you don't have to work anymore, you don't have to study anymore, because then a sponsor will say to a youngster, right, but the only way you can be really good as a pro boxer as well is to be dedicated and disciplined. You've got to train every single day, twice a day. You've got to run hard in the morning, you've got to get to a boxing gym in the afternoon, and you've got to do it every day. And that way you can get sponsors, and that way you can be a full-time professional boxer. So it's not easy.
When you come back, I want us to focus on the red tapes within boxing as a sport itself, bureaucratic policies, in fact, that hinders, if not actually denies many boxers maybe access to licenses and stuff like that, so that you can educate us on that. Sipho, being a ring announcer, does one need qualification of any formal qualification attained from any institution of higher learning, or this is just a skill that one is born with? You need just to harness the skill as you go along the way and stuff like that. How does one eventually become a boxing ring announcer? And practically in yourself, how did you get that opportunity?
Okay, thank you very much for that question, and Biggie, and I would like to thank Biggie on Sport as well for hosting us, to talk about this sport, which is a sport that is followed worldwide. It's one of the best sports that one can get involved in, and as Brian has already alluded to, Brian is a legend, and the one thing that stands out as he speaks to us here is education. I think it's important that within sports, any sporting category, we have to look at, educating our youth. The youth have got to put education first. Not actually saying, I'm getting into the sport and I'm going to make money, because that's the mindset. The mindset is, I'm going to make money, I'm going to look after my family, but I'm going to leave the most important thing, that is education. I think you've actually pointed out very adequately there, Brian. So if you come to, for your question, when you're saying ring announcing, I would say a prerequisite, the most important thing is that go to school, understand, the languages, understand how you can communicate, and as yourself, as a host here, for you to be able to do this, you got to be able to converse, to talk to people, in a certain language. So you basically need education, but not to an extent yet that you go to become a graduate, like people do, get a graduate. But I think, it's actually important for you to understand what you're talking about and how to communicate with people. So getting into the ring, this is where the essence of the whole ring announce, the skill comes in as well. That you're able to communicate to people, you're able to read the whole broad audience that you're talking to. You know, you're able to discuss and relay the boxers, as Brian Michel would be walking into the ring.
Okay.
What is he wearing?
Okay.
You know, what is he wearing? The trunks he's wearing. Okay. What is the weight?
Okay.
You know, you got to know those. I mean, that is given to you, but you've got to be able to communicate that to the audience is listening to you.
Okay.
Now, sometimes it's easy when there is no TV, you know, or your cameras that are looking at you. Like there's cameras right now. You know, cameras sometimes put you at a disadvantage because you end up trying to do something that you're not. You know, you're not natural. You know, you must be natural, be able to converse and say, this is what I'm saying, but it's you know, talking. It's not somebody else. Some people would like to, for instance, Michael Buffer, you know, let's get ready to rumble, you know. Now, people would expect that from me when I stand there like, let's get ready to rumble. But I don't do that. Because I'm African, I know the context is African. I'm here, you know. I normally would say, Kuya Fiwa. This is what I say. That's how I go, like that. So these are things that you intrinsically learn, you know, and basically say, this is what I want to be, this is how I'm going to communicate to people, but make it in effect that the audience gets to understand that you're talking about the boxer. The boxer is here, and you're basically telling them what is going to be happening, you know, painting the picture of what is going to be happening in this fight. So you're introducing the boxer, you're introducing the other boxer. So basically, that's what ring announcing is about, but very importantly, as Brian has said earlier on, it's education. First, you got to be able to be educated so that you can be able to express yourself, be able to communicate, you know, what is needed in terms of guiding the fight and guiding the tournament, that people understand what is basically happening. That's the message that you're taking out there. The other thing is you know, you're looking at how you dress as well. You know, you got to be able to dress in a way that people respect what you're doing, and that obviously you respect the boxers. You know, because the occasion is about the boxers. It's not about you. So you got to be able to do that. The one thing that is distinct with me, you know, and which people know, and Brian might say that as well, is that you know, I come into an occasion, in an event, and I change my attires. You know, I think you've seen that me do that a lot of time. I change attires. You know, I'll go.
Why is that?
Because I would like to bring in the excitement. You know, people are watching us. You know, so instead of wearing one suit, you know, like a black and a white, you know, which is the normal that the ring announcers would come into the ring and wear. I sort of change. I give them that type of an entertainment where the fans are going to look at that, and the boxers as well, that they're able to be associating with this environment, that it's one of the best tournaments that's coming up, and really respecting the boxing, you know, fraternity as well. So that is one thing that I do uniquely, and that people would know me by. You know?
The question I'm going to ask now, guys, I want you also to actually participate in this question, Brian. Boxing as a sport doesn't get sufficient, if not enough, coverage, especially on television. And we know that there's been a standoff in as far as broadcasting rights are concerned between the public broadcaster and a digital pay channel, which is SuperSport, obviously, for over the years. And now we see boxing is making its comeback, especially on SuperSport. Do you think that by obscuring boxing as a sport, or taking it away from the television screens, it denies perhaps many young aspirant kids out there who like to be future boxers, especially in South Africa?
Yeah, I think, you know, you mentioned SuperSport. SuperSport obviously does a great job for all our sports, but we need all our networks to promote boxing, you know. I kind of blame the media. You guys are in media, I'm in media as well.
Okay.
It's our faults that we're not promoting the sport enough. It's in a good place right now. Internationally, it's going well. And even in South Africa, there's a lot of new promoters coming along. So it's great for the sport. You know, I've got a gym and I manage fighters and help with Golden Gloves promoting. And I think boxing is getting into a good space again. We used to be the #1 sport in South
world.
Africa many years ago. Well, maybe #2 to soccer, but we were right up there. Now boxing's rated about #6. I think.
6, yeah.
Which it shouldn't be because it's a popular sport, you know, that we love. So I'd like to see boxing get back to at least #2 or 3 in South Africa. And the only way we can do that is to keep promoting it. New promoters to come along and to educate the youth on how to do it properly. I think you're busy asking me that question early on. What do the young guys do that come out of school? Like we said, education is important. When you're 18 and you got your matric and you want to be a fighter, well, firstly train hard and then get yourself a good manager. You know, there's good managers out there. I'm obviously one of them, but I'm not just the only one. There's good professional managers out there that'll give you good advice and tell you how to do it, how to go for a boxing license, how to train to be a professional boxer, you know, how to train to get sponsored by for a company to look at you and want you. Like Sipho was saying, he does well with dressing in different outfits. It's great because it's entertainment. Boxing is entertainment as well. So for the youngsters, don't be scared to come in a flashy outfit. And so some people might think you're arrogant. It doesn't matter. It's entertainment. So that's a good thing to dress up and be confident.
You've been in the sport for about 54 years, if I'm not mistaken.
I've been in the sport for 55 years.
55
I started
years.
when I was 9 years old.
Yeah.
So it's like a lifetime.
as a boxer or sport personality, when do you decide now it's time? I call
To retire?
Yeah, I call it quits now. That's enough.
From everything or from boxing?
No, from boxing, from as a fighter. You say
Yeah,
enough, it's enough. Does that comes with some environmental factors, or perhaps it's a decision, a personal decision that you take on your own?
Yeah, you know, that's a very good question, Biggie, because at the end of the day, what I say to people, when you're 18 and you become a pro boxer, nobody's holding a gun to your head. Maybe your parents are, but nobody's really holding a gun to your head and say you must become a pro boxer or a pro, any sportsman. You become a pro boxer because you want to be a pro boxer. So, but when it comes time to retire is the tough part. Now you got to start looking in the mirror. If your family's honest enough with you, they must say, listen, you know, maybe you're taking a bit too much punishment. And for me personally, I found in the gym, if you start slowing down and your reflexes start going, when the punches are coming in, you're not getting out the way, you're actually getting hit with those punches. Yeah, you must be honest with yourself.
Okay.
You know, I was only 30, but I'd had a long career. I'd had 49 pro fights, 14 world title fights, 9 South African pro
At
fights.
30?
At 30 years old, yeah.
Wow.
But I did start young. It worked well for me. At 21, I was a South African champion as a pro. 25, I was a world champion. 30, I was a double world champion. And for me, I could have made a lot more money. So it mustn't just be about money either. You know, your brain's on the line. You got to. That's where you need to be educated and to have a good management team and a good family to say, listen, maybe it's time to get out. Maybe you're taking too many punches. And that's where you need a good team around you. Your family must be honest with you.
To advise
you must be
you.
honest with yourself. If you're taking too many cracks in sparring, it's time to get out. If you can't get out the way like you could 5 years ago of those punches, you can see them coming but you can't get out the way, then time to call it a day.
Who is the international boxer that you used to look up to? I back yours back during your
So
tenure.
I go back a long way. The greatest fighter ever for me was a guy called Sugar Ray Robinson. But that's like before all of our time. But I think he like invented boxing. He was so ahead of his time. He did what Sugar Ray Leonard did in the 80s.
Okay.
And Sugar Ray Leonard was the other great fighter that I loved. I loved Sugar Ray Leonard. In South Africa, my dad was a South African champion, so he was my hero.
Okay.
My dad only had a couple of fights when I was very young. And Arnold Taylor was one of my boxing heroes, a South African bantamweight. And then I think, you know, Muhammad Ali is the GOAT of boxing.
Okay.
He's not to me, he's not in my top 5 best fighters of all time. But if you talk about a GOAT, Muhammad Ali is the GOAT. He's everybody knows him.
He's the GOAT.
You know, he's the
He's the
GOAT.
GOAT.
I'm going to strike an example here. In the context of football, a lot of people say that yesteryear players were better off than current players that we have. And they don't seem to show commitment. They don't seem to respect the badge.
Yes.
They don't show any drive or passion whatsoever.
Yeah.
I'm going to contextualize this into boxing.
Yeah, no, definitely. The thing is, I mean, if I look at, and it's quite obvious, we can all watch television and watch old fights and compare like me or Leonard or whoever, Mike Tyson, to the guys of today. We wanted it more, you know, and it's maybe because there wasn't a lot of money around and there wasn't technology and, you know, there wasn't sponsors throwing us with money. We wanted it more, so we were more ambitious. The youngsters probably won't like what I'm saying, but it's just how I feel, and it's to answer your question. We worked harder towards our goal. We were more ambitious, and that's what the youngsters need to do again. They need to become like we were in the 80s and that. And even the heavyweights of the 70s were great, the Ali, Foreman, Norton, you know, Fraser. And then in the 80s you had the four kings. I wasn't one of them. It was Leonard, Hagler, Hearns and Duran. That was the four kings of the planet. You know, in South Africa I was big with Dingaan Tobela, Baby J, Karel Volbrecht, you know, we were the big boys in our country. But yeah, to answer your question properly, I think we just wanted it more those years. So it's almost like boxing didn't evolve like it should have.
Yeah.
But it is changing, I must say.
It is changing.
It is changing. If you look at the fight the other day, even I didn't even actually rate them. Eubank and what's his? Eubank fought Chris Eubank Jr. and Nigel Benn. And it was a great fight, and I didn't even really rate them as good fighters, but they kind of did what we did in the 80s. Get in there and put it on the line. It's not a sparring session. So I say, you know, even as a commentator, sometimes people like what I say, sometimes they don't. Hopefully they like it most of the time. If it's a boring fight, to me, I call it, because it's not a sparring session. When you get an opportunity to fight in front of crowd on television, you got to impress the promoters, you got to impress the crowd, so they're going to pay to watch you fight again. Put it on the line. You know, this is your opportunity. If you're in the gym sparring, it's a different thing. But when you fight, you must fight. And that's what makes you great.
We're going to be looking at Brian Mitchell's life beyond boxing after your career as a boxer and still involved in boxing, but in a different way. I want you to share with the viewers. Sipho,
Yes, Biggie.
if you were not a ring boxing announcer,
If I was not, you know, I mean, in economics, we call it opportunity cost, you know, the cost of having to do something else. Yeah, I would probably have been, are you talking sport-wise or are you talking as a career?
I don't know.
Okay, as a career, probably the legal fraternity I would be pursuing, you know. But in sports, maybe continue with tennis.
Okay.
You know, tennis, you know, was my, when I started off as a sports person, I started in tennis. You know, this is where I grew up. I understood the game. You know, this is where I basically made my name as a tennis player, you know, before coming into boxing. There's a question you asked about, you know, broadcasting, you know, TV and all that.
Yeah, not giving
SABC,
enough coverage to the sport itself.
Yeah, I think it's a very important question you're asking because, and as Brian has already also stated that, you know, there's television and obviously television is looking at what kind of fights are there, you know, is this a prestigious event? You know, it's all about, now it's showbiz, you know, it's basically how do you sell a fight to be on TV? You know, and I think it's even better that you're coming in with podcasts as well.
Exactly.
That people can just get to see the fight. But remember in those days when we grew up, there was SABC. You know, SABC is accessible to everybody. I'm talking now from, you know, where people are disadvantaged in the townships. They cannot afford to watch DSTV and Super
channels,
you know, maybe watch Brian Michel on Super Sport. Some of them won't know who Brian Michel is, you know, but when that time you would know who Dingan Thobela was. You know, you'd know who Baby Jake Matala was. You would know who Arthur Maisela is, the Fighting Prince. You know, Tsipas Kosana, because it used to be accessible. It was a public broadcaster accessible to people who would not afford. You know, but right now, as television went out of boxing, you know, SABC went out of boxing, and it wasn't accessible to the people in the developing areas, you know, in the rural, rural townships. So it's difficult for them to identify with our legends, our sporting heroes and the boxers, you know, the champions that are there. And I can tell you, I can bet you right now, you can take a champion right now like, let's say a champion like Malajika, you know, and let him walk in a township, they wouldn't know who he is. You know, I can walk in a township, they wouldn't know who I am.
Hence, Olive Branch Entertainment has come up
with this Entertainment is coming in now
platform.
To say, you know, because
to make sure that we showcase the talent of these people.
People must be able to know who their champions are. You know, who are the people that are there in the sport. You know, if it's Brian Michel, they must know it's Brian Michel walking out there. So at this moment, I can walk in town here. They don't even know I'm a ring announcer. I can walk and, you know, get out of town. People don't, because they do not see. You know, we do not make it possible for them to see that happening. In the previous years, it was there because the TV was there. They could open a TV, a child would open a TV and say, oh, there's Brian Michel. You know, it's Brian Michel. And even if they meet Brian Michel, they know it's Brian Michel. Okay. So we need to change that a bit, you know, because yes, we understand DSTV is there, SuperSport is there, but it's not accessible to a lot of people. You know, we got to try to make that accessible. And the Olive, obviously, your
Olive Branch Entertainment,
Branch Entertainment, Biggie on Sport, you know, that it's accessible. People can just get on, you know, maybe use your data. You know, everything now is data as well. You know, technology is there, but it's also data. They pay for data, you know. So if we get back to where we were before, where we would have the whole sporting fraternity, the whole sporting codes accessible, like boxing, there would be, you know, more of our youth will also anticipate to get into the sport. They will look forward to getting into the sport because now they can learn what is happening. And obviously, they will be able to watch as events are happening, tournaments are happening, the champions that are there, they can take pride in the champions that are there. It's so sad because there's a lot of champions, but we don't know who they are. You know?
Brian, you are now a promoter, boxing, Golden Glove. Golden Glove boxing.
Well, I'm not actually the promoter. Rodney Berman is the promoter.
So you work alongside Rodney Berman?
I work for the company. I do all the interviews for YouTube.
Okay.
And I'm the publicist, you can say.
Okay, I see.
For Golden Gloves.
Okay.
And the ambassador.
PR work of some sort.
Yes.
Okay. And you guys recently, in fact, in honor of Dingan Thobela the late, you came up with a bursary scheme. Can you reflect more on that?
Yes, so Golden Glove decided to come up with a bursary scheme, and there was a young man that was already given the bursary in one of our last tournaments, and Golden Gloves will continue with keeping that great name, Dingan Thobela's legacy going.
Yeah.
And so that's one of the things that Golden Gloves does, which is great. The other thing they're doing now with all I said to you off air, every fighter now that signs with Golden Gloves and fights on their shows, 10% gets taken off your purse.
Wow.
So if it's 100K, let's say it's 10,000, goes to Old Mutual, goes to an insurance company, and that stays with the insurance company for 5 years. If the guys want to reinvest after 5 years, that's probably what we suggest to them to do, because after 5 years they're probably still young, but they can't take it within 5 years.
Okay.
So the promoter has got the key to that, which is a good thing, because then you know at least. Even a youngster today becomes a pro boxer, wants to retire in 5 years, he's maybe got a couple of 100K invested, he's made something out of boxing. And that's what we have to give back. And that's what we want to give back.
Yeah, behind the scenes we had a chat prior to this conversation that you're quite, in fact, elated, if not happy, in as far as developments are concerned within BSA Boxing South Africa, as well as the work done by the minister, new minister, Gayton McKenzie. Last year you were inducted in the Hall of Fame, and you guys were given some awards by the minister in one of the events. Talk us through that.
Yeah, well, the South African Hall of Fame I was inducted into a few years ago, but Gayton McKenzie had a big event. Unfortunately, I couldn't make the event, but it was a brilliant event where he honoured all the fighters, me being one of them, financially as well, which we didn't expect. And he's just doing such a great job for boxing.
Okay.
You know, he's got the right spirit, he's got the right attitude. And I think he walks the talk. You know, he's not, a lot of our politicians don't walk the talk.
Indeed.
And Gayton McKenzie is really doing it.
Yeah.
You know, he's helping people financially, ex-boxers, and he's pulling into boxing, and he's coming to the boxing tournaments. And I love what Gayton McKenzie is doing.
Sipho, would you echo the same sentiments?
Oh yeah,
we are very quickly before we close. Yeah,
it was an honor for me to be MC at that event.
Okay.
You know, where Gayton, the minister, the honorable minister.
How would you describe him?
Yeah.
How would you describe? Especially his work.
Yeah, I think he's a breath of fresh air.
Okay.
He's a breath of fresh air. He's you know, people might say this is not popular, you know, what he does, but I think he does something that one does not anticipate.
Okay.
You know, he's always doing the goes out of the way. You know, he's looking at the broad picture. And I think he's done a lot for boxing. You know, he's got passion for boxing. And when he held that event, you know, it started at the convention in East London, where he promised, he even promised to say, look, I'm going to bring the legends together under one roof. And it happened in Pretoria. I think it was the 31st of March. And we were all there. I was the MC of the event. And he surprised the legends because he's standing there in front. He says, just check your phones, see what's happening there. And they checked the phones. There was money in the phones that he gave to them, you know, and in honoring them. And it meant a lot for them, you know, because as Brian would, you know, agree with me, what I say is that the legends, some of the legends are so poor. You know, we got poor legends that have nothing they've made nothing out of the sport of boxing. So he basically helped them at that moment, but he's actually saying, in essence, we should be looking after our fighters, you know, as we are here, and basically giving them also incentives as they give us. They have the pride in actually giving us entertainment in the sport of boxing. You know, for everybody that knows that there is a legend, they must know that that legend is well looked after. You know, so yes, kudos to him, you know, and I think we wish him well. And I think there's a lot of good that will come out of him in his position.
Brian and Sipho, both of you, I'm about to let you go. But Brian, before I let you go, please speak to the audience and tell them, especially young people, why it is important, or why they should, actually not important, but why they should join boxing, and what are the benefits of boxing out there if they would love to join boxing, and where can they go to, and speak on behalf of your stable together with your partner as to what is it that you guys are offering, and if you would like to be contacted for more interventions, if not discussions, please do.
Yeah, sure. Well, the youngsters, you know, my number's out there on social media. My wife runs my gym, Charlene Mitchell. And I just want to say to the youngsters, like we said, education is very important. You know, get your matric. When you're 18, come speak to me, speak to any of the other top managers in the country. You want to be a professional boxer. But professional boxing is dedication, it's discipline and determination. And you've got to have those 3 Ds to become a professional boxer and to be good. And the great thing about boxing is that it teaches you all these things. It teaches you to have self-confidence. It teaches you to know how to fight. You know, all of us, even I was bullied at school. We've all been bullied at some stage in our life. It teaches you to have that self-confidence, and you can make a lot of money out of boxing if you're really good. If you got that X factor, you become one of the greats of boxing. There's plenty of money to be made, but you got to work hard to make that money. From me, Brian Mitchell, thank you for watching. Any socials that they can find you on? I'm on all these social medias. Okay. On Facebook, on Instagram. Okay. They'll find me there. Okay. Sipho.
Well, but to wrap it up, just to speak to young people out there who once perhaps saw you starting your staff there as an announcer, and they would like to actually fill your shoes and say, only one day. Talk to them. How do they go about? Who should they contact to get themselves in that space?
Thank you, Biggie on Sports. I think, you know, it's very important for us to encourage our youth to get involved in the sport of boxing. Right now, as we're speaking about boxing, you know, we've got so many social ills that we're facing. You know, the kids are involved in a lot of things that are not worthy to be spoken about, you know, alcohol, drugs, and all that. So sports is a relevant thing that kids should be involved in. And so I would like to see more kids getting involved in boxing. If you want to be a ring announcer, you know, get involved in the sport of boxing. Let me know. You can talk to me. I am on social media, but I would like to get away from social media because social media, I found out, takes a lot of my time, you know, because I spend a lot of time on it. But you can contact me, you know, DM me, and we are happy to be able to assist you to get involved in the sport of boxing as a ring announcer. Thank you very much. I hope you've enjoyed the show, Biggie on Sports.
Well, with that being said, Brian, the legend, Michel, known as the Road Warrior, thank you so much for coming through onto our platform, Biggie on Sport. To you as well, Sipho Mashego. Thank you, gentlemen, for coming through. Yeah. Well, we leave it at that for today. Your episode, a beautiful episode, informative, educative, as we hosted the legends here. And Mr. Minister of Sport, Gayton McKenzie, I hope you did actually hear the legend speaking so well about the work that you are doing. And Biggie on Sport is looking forward to have you on this chair one day so that we can look at sport holistically within the country because of the work, and not just work, but wonderful work that you are doing so that we can share with the rest of the world. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you so much to the technical guys at Arise Media House, as well as my technical producers, Jimmy Mashazi and Kuma Tembegile, as well as directors of Oliver Branch Entertainment. Until then, sharp sharp.